like to thank Kairos and especially Ed for inviting me today. It was quite a surprise. My name used to be Grant, and everybody gets surprised when I announce myself as Victoria Boucher now. I just wanted to, I'm going to open with a prayer song. This song is from Georgina Island. It was given to me from Georgina Island, but it's a niche song, and it's usually sung in the lodges. But it's a very short prayer, and it says, Creator, thank you for all the knowledge you give us, and we hold it sacred. But brothers and sisters, we are here today on reconciliation, and I won't talk about snowflakes because I know Bob. And he comes from Tyendinaga. He lives on Tyendinaga, but he's also a Ojibwe, and anybody lives on Tyendinaga with his family there. I am a Ojibwe. I consider myself Anishinaabe. Anishinaabe accompanies the Cree, all the Algonquin-speaking people, which are the Algonquin people, and the Innu, and the big family of Cree. The Ojibwe are part of the three fires from Manitoulin Island. We hold the sacred fire there. I went to residential school for 8 years in Thunder Bay, Ontario. It was called Fort William at the time. So you know how old I am. I'm retired from the federal government. I worked in HRDC in education. And my heart actually is in education, but I was invited to come to Ottawa in 2002 to be the liaison with the Legal Surveys Division in Natural Resources Canada. And this opened up another passion of mine, which is land management on the reserves. And then I was absconded into the communications, and I lost my contact with the communities then. So I had to find a way to be in touch with the communities. So what I did was I sent out all the media reports, which were public, and to inform all my contacts on my list about what natural resources was doing in the environment and on the lands. I never heard a word back, but people would tell me that they'd argue with me, especially about legal surveys and it being the government. So I had to reply back about the Canada Lands Act, etc., which is actually a protection for our lands in a way, but that's not the subject today. But I came in the last few minutes to Peter Ernick's presentation from the North, and I spent a few of my years, 17 years actually, of my career in the Northwest Territories, and I've traveled all over the territories. But one funny story about his community in Rankin Inlet, I had a beautiful amauti, it's like a jacket from the North. It had wolf fur. It was just a gorgeous jacket. So I got off at Rankin Inlet, and you had to walk to the terminal. And so I had to wait there for, I don't know how many, half an hour for the next connecting flight up north of Rankin Inlet. Can you believe it? So I stood and I was much heavier then. So I stood there with all the other women in all their amautis and colorful parkas and everything. And I looked around and nobody gave me a glance. So I felt like E.T. But anyway, I had many wonderful experiences in the North, and I don't think that not very many people have seen that land and have communicated with the people there. They're wonderful, hardworking, sturdy people. But getting back to the Ojibwe Nation, I got invited back here, and I joined a drum group here in Ottawa, and this is one of the songs that we were given, but it didn't become part of their repertoire, but I just learned it kind of on my own. But here it is. It's Thank you, Creator, for all the knowledge you give us. And then I'll come back and share with you my story on, a little bit on the reconciliation. I like the way that Ed introduced me as being a residential school student. I don't like to use the word survivor. It reminds me too much of a victim. I never considered myself a victim. I considered myself a student, although I never was anything else but a Native person. I was born 65 years ago in northwestern Ontario in a little place. I'm from the Fort William First Nation. My father is a Boucher from the Fort William First Nation. My mother is a Primo from around Fort Francis, Couchiching. So actually, my mother is Cree and my father is Ojibwe. I went to school to St. Joseph's boarding school, which was in Thunder Bay, Ontario for 8 years. What you see right now is the top of an iceberg. I look like I'm together. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, just in the last 10 years. In that time, I uncovered the bottom of the iceberg, which is the loneliness, the isolation, the sense of abandonment, and the shame that comes along with being an oppressed member of, I'll say, Fort William First Nation. I was put there for a reason. My mother attended that school. My mother was not a role model. She could not be a role model for being a woman and a mother. So that sense was very, very difficult. So I had to work my way through that. The drum is a healing tool for the wounded little girl inside of me. I don't want to be treated as a little girl, but I am a woman. But all those experiences make up the person that I am. I put aside a lot of my feelings, and in my working life, I worked a lot with Native organization. I worked with Harold Cardinal. I worked with him during the time of the white paper and the red paper. I worked with him when he was responding to the white paper. And he worked with elders. And I learned a lot from working with leaders like Harold Cardinal and George Erasmus. They were true leaders. They always consulted with the people. There was nothing power or ego about them. And they did not get a lot of money. I know that because I saw their paychecks. I went to work with files in Human Resources Development Canada. One of the things that being in education is that I worked towards my bachelor in education, but because of my, how should I say it, my lack of self-esteem, and I was always distracted by something. I was searching for something. I never was calm or could settle down to study, so I never completed my Bachelor of Education, but I did go towards my a certificate in adult education. And that served me well in Human Resource Development Canada. And when I worked in Yellowknife, we worked a lot with the people there, and that was the beginning of the transfer of responsibility of skills development to the communities at that time. That was almost 20 years ago. We were not allowed to say self-government. But that was always my attitude, that I've always had Aboriginal files, but I'm retired now, so I've finished that. I don't want to go work for the government anymore. It's very, very difficult to develop. You don't develop programs. You kind of administer programs that somebody else develops. Anyway, getting back to my residential school, when I first came to Ottawa, I sort of muddled around in this in the drum group. I learned a lot from the drum group, and some of my friends, who are still my friends to this day, were workers in the residential school programs, and they encouraged me a lot. So I went to therapy, and that's when she diagnosed me with the PTSD. With that, meaning for me, I couldn't identify my feelings. I didn't know what fear was. I didn't know what love was. So during this time, I had a dream. And this dream was about my inner feelings about this fear and forgiveness. Also, when you have a dream, it's about yourself also. And I have a love of history. I always have to know where we are in history and what influences people and policies of why they do this or why they do that. I was 5 years old when I went to residential school. I came off the trap line. I went to residential school. I was so small. I peed the bed one night, and I guess I committed a mortal sin. It was a Catholic school. So the nun called me, in my dream, and it was the Sisters of St. Joseph. And they had these black veils and these white things here in the bib, and I was really scared. You know, you had this little bowl cut. You know, they cut off your braids, and it seems like they cut off your culture when they cut your braids. So I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and this big nun was standing up there with her penguin clothes, right? And the stairs were so tall. There must have been about 10 stairs. So I couldn't hear what she was saying. I know she was scolding me. But all of a sudden, the stairs started to level off, and they became very straight. I was standing here, and she was over here in a cage. So in my dream, I felt really good. I was kind of always quiet. I never really spoke out. But I kind of walked across the little stairs, which became kind of like a ladder, and I opened the cage and I let her out. So that action empowered me, that I was equal to this person. And I started to understand that she was also imprisoned by her own history, her own teachings, and this is what she was taught. Hi, Albert. So anyway, we became equal. So that was my first beginning of forgiveness. I forgave her. But it was not only this nun with the stern face. It was this whole church thing, this whole where, it was a St. Joseph, it's a residential school for nuns and girls and boys. And when I think about it, the good things in the residential school was that I had 3 meals a day. They weren't perfect. I had porridge every morning for 10 years. And I was warm. I had a bed. We were separated from the boys, so there was no interaction, so that was a loss. I also did not suffer lateral violence in that school. I was protected by violence on the outside. I don't say this very much, I have a cousin that was murdered. They never found her murderer. I also discovered that there's a lot of mental illness in my family. So that was kind of like a a sign of like a sick society. So that's what the residential school protected me from, some of this lateral violence. But when I came out after 8 years, I went to high school, I realized that my mother did not have the upbringing to role model what a woman was supposed to be, what a mother was supposed to be. I had this idea that you were supposed to nurture your children and look after them, etc. So this idea of forgiveness grew into something much bigger. So I started to understand that unless people all claim a Canadian history, they have to claim Aboriginal history also. That's reconciliation, that we are equal. We have a deep history in this country. We were here before never mind the doctrine of discovery and all that, and why the greediness of the fur traders and why they abused our women and then went back to wherever they came from and were with their married spouses. We forgive that. We can't hold on to that. We can't hold on to that negative energy. And I'm smiling at Denise, because she's smiling at me. So that reconciliation again, and in more simple terms, it's like the right side of the ledger equals the left side of the ledger. Everybody understands money. Everybody cannot understand the emotional turmoil that we went through. But on the other hand, the average Canadian can understand what their forefathers. You go to the West, you go to the Western I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but the Western provinces are full of graves of women who died in childbirth. They were not the healthiest, the nutrition wasn't the healthiest, but now they didn't take the example of the Aboriginal woman, what the Aboriginal women were eating. They were not having miscarriages. They were having their babies right on not on the run, but when they were traveling, they would stop and have their babies and carry on. So we don't have that kind of, we have that's our history, our healthy history. So I want to end, I know because I'm taking up so much time here, but I wanted to end up with the forgiveness is the start. And we have to start as individuals at each side. Then we can go into our communities, we go into our schools, and we help each other learn about each other. That way we can leave and let go of all the racism and the misconceptions about each other. So I would like to end that with a song and a prayer. And the song this time will be a four-direction song. Does anybody want to ask questions? Am I allowed to ask that? Oh, okay, I'll just wrap it up. And I listen to the Dene singers a lot, so they sing really fast. Thank you.